Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in again. We are going to start a new mini-series today, and that is on giving. A very touchy topic, but a necessary topic. The concept of giving to a church or a charitable organization is not new or hard to understand, but the basis for it, the level of it, and the order for it are less clear, and on this point there would be more discussion, maybe even some debate among good Christians. And so this is not going to be a definitive work on giving by any means, but a snapshot of it, and hopefully it will be a good reminder, and maybe there will be some teaching that is new for some people too. So the question for today is, do I have to give? The simple answer is yes. And if that were the end of it, this would be the shortest devotional I'll probably ever do. But that would give no background and no defense, no explanation for it from the scripture. So at the beginning, this is awkward for me since I am a pastor and I benefit personally from your giving to Compass Church. And so, boy, giving is one of the hardest things for a good pastor to teach on, and yet it is important for people to be properly instructed in every area of Scripture, and giving is an area of Scripture. It is interesting that when the topic of giving or tithing comes up, some Christians will argue that that is part of the law, and we as Christians are not under the law. So where does the concept of giving start? Is it found in Exodus? Well, no. The first example of giving comes from Genesis. Genesis 14, 18 to 20 says, "And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. Now he was a priest of God Most High. He blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. He gave him a tenth of all." So the background on this is there were a number of kings that attacked another number of kings, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah were on the losing end of that, and Lot at that time was already living in or around Sodom. He was taken captive. Abraham heard about this, and Abraham pursues the kings that had taken Lot and his family captive and rescues Lot and defeats the armies of those kings and takes a whole bunch of spoil back. And as he's traveling back south, he comes to just outside of the city, of Jerusalem. The king of Salem is king of Jerusalem. Melchizedek is given no background here, and nothing is mentioned of him again until Psalm 110, and then nothing again until the book of Hebrews. And the writer of Hebrews forms an argument proving on the basis of Melchizedek and Abraham giving a tithe to Melchizedek, relating to Jesus being better than the tribe of Levi, and the tribe of Levi in effect being submissive to Jesus, the Messiah, the Redeemer. And there's a whole argument there that we're not going to get into, but the basis of that comes from Genesis 14. This is the only narrative account of Melchizedek that is found in all of Scripture. And truths are built upon that, but the narrative and the story and the account is found only in these couple verses. We don't know definitively anything about Melchizedek, and that's, I think, on purpose, to prove the point that the writer of Hebrews is intending to make and the psalmist is intending to make. The second scripture relating to giving comes from Genesis 28, verses 20 to 22. "Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me, and will keep me on this journey that I take, and will give me food to eat and garments to wear, and I return to my father's house in safety, then the Lord will be my God. This stone, which I have set up as a pillar, will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you." So Jacob is at Bethel. He is fleeing from his brother Esau, and the future is very unknown, very uncertain. He knows where he's going, but he doesn't know how he'll be received. He doesn't know what lies ahead. And so he makes this promise, he makes this vow. Both of these scriptures predate the giving of the law by hundreds of years, and they are examples of an action rather than the giving of a command. So the question is, why would Abraham and Jacob do this? If there is no command given by this point, then where did the idea come from? And they may be doing it in different ways. Abraham is not giving, as one commentator said, a tenth of his earnings. He's giving a tenth of the spoil. And there's no indication that this is an ongoing thing for him, but a one-time thing for him. Jacob, on the other hand, this vow would seem to be more of an ongoing thing, and there is a condition attached to it, which I find very hard to understand. If God will provide for him, then Jacob will give a tenth. But still the point remains, if this predates the giving of the law, then where did the concept come from? And these are one of many passages in Scripture where the event is recorded with no explanation and no commentary. The Bible does not interpret what it records many, many times. And we are left to find that out on our own. If you're wondering why Abraham and Jacob do this, the Bible doesn't tell you, at least not directly. And so I can't explain from these passages why Abraham and Jacob do this, but it is interesting that they do, and it leads to some observations and to some questions that we can apply to today. So number one, it is clear and obvious that the Mosaic Law was not given before Moses. That's why it's called the Mosaic Law. And so it cannot have applied to either Abraham or Jacob. It is unknown how much oral instruction had come in one manner or another directly from God to his servants by Abraham and Jacob's time. So any thoughts that it did are pure speculation. But at the same time, it should not be completely ruled out. If you go back to Genesis 4, you read about Cain and Abel offering sacrifices and offerings to God. Where did that come from? We don't know. But to say that they just thought of it on their own is probably not true. They were probably given some manner of expectation or requirement by God himself. How he did that, we're not told. That he did that, we're not told. But the fact that they come with offerings. Now, one is accepted, one is rejected, but the very fact that they both come suggests that there was some manner of instruction for the idea to come to them in the first place. The idea that Abraham and Jacob both have this idea of a tenth, where'd they get that from? It may well be that God has given some manner of instruction. You can't rule it out. You can't say that it was, but you can't say it wasn't. So the question for today comes to my attitude. And what is my attitude about the money that I earn and the money that I have? The fact that Abraham and Jacob chose to give money to God before the giving of the law should say something to people who don't want to be bound by the law. So how much do I give, and why do I give? If I believe that the concept of tithing still applies today, then do I see that as both the minimum and the maximum? And I'm going to present both sides here, so if this grates against you, just wait a minute. If I believe that the concept of tithing, and tithing by definition means a tenth, if I believe that applies, then do I give 8%? Would I give 12%? Or do I think that 10% is the only number that I can give, but also I'm not bound or should never consider giving more? And so then do I give because I have to or because I want to? For others who do not believe that the concept of tithing still applies today, honestly, why do you believe that? Is it because I truly don't see the concept pass from Old Testament to New Testament? And if that's the case, can I back that up with Scripture? Or is it because I don't want to give 10%? Do people who dispute the concept of tithing give more or less than those who do not dispute the concept of tithing? those who say, I'm not bound by the law, you can't put 10% on me, do they do so and then give more than 10%, or do they do so as a way of justifying giving less than 10%? I can't answer that, but you can answer that for you. You should know where you fall on this. Do you accept the concept of tithing for today, or do you reject the concept of tithing for today? You probably have an idea of where you fall on that. And then, particularly for those who would reject the concept of tithing, how much do you give? There's no way you could say that we should not give anything. So if you reject 10%, then what do you give? If you have no idea what you give, that's not good. People who have no idea what they give tend to give very little. And that's why they don't know, is because they don't do. People who give with regularity and with intention, they may not be able to give you right off the top of their head a percentage of their income, but they could ballpark it because they plan for it and they do it that way. So if you reject the concept of tithing, then how much do you give? And if you've rejected the concept so that you can give less, I don't know where you would point to a verse in the New Testament that would show you that the concepts and the guidelines and the standards put forward in the Old Testament have been reduced in the New. I don't find that. I find, in fact, the standards are raised. They are increased. And so if you don't want to hold to a 10%, and if you want it to be less, how would you defend that? By a New Testament scripture. If it's the fact that you feel you can't afford it, how would you defend that? Also by scripture. Since Psalm 24 would say the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. So if you want to hold on to more than what you think you should because it's economics, that's not a good line of reasoning. I would encourage you, as we make our way through this today, to know what you give. If you're not sure, it shouldn't be that tricky to find out. You're the one who gives. So figure it out. Go look at your bank statements. Go check out however far back you need to go. How far back do you have to go to where you gave last? And what amount was that? You should probably have an idea of what you make in a year. It shouldn't be very, very hard to figure out what you give in a year, especially since we've just come through tax season not that long ago. I challenge you to ask God, is He pleased with what you give? I guarantee you that God has an opinion on that. I guarantee you that He cares. The question would be, do you care what He cares about? Does it affect your giving? Whether He would impress something on your heart or not. And so begin by asking. Begin by seeking His face and searching for His will, that you might stay within it. May God bless you today.